All right, so welcome back to the RunThrough Trails podcast. I'm your regular host, James Tilley, but we've got a little bit of a different format today. I'm actually going to be the guest on my own podcast, which is a nice luxury. It's kind of like my experience yesterday being the runner at my own event. But we're joined by Ben Sheppard today. Welcome, Ben.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah. So, Ben, luckily, we've got a professional podcast host to show us kind of how it's done. So hopefully, future episodes aren't too embarrassing when it's back to me asking the questions. But Ben's kindly agreed to join the show and come and have a chat with me today about, well, all sorts of different things. So I'm going to hand over to Ben. He's going to take away the hosting duties, and I'm just going to answer some questions.
Yeah, man. I'm really excited about this actually, and we're going to put this out on the Gone Running feed as well, which is the other podcast that run through. So yeah, if you don't subscribe to Gone Running and you're a RunThrough Trails listener, go and listen to Gone Running, and vice versa. If you're a Gone Running listener and you don't listen to RunThrough Trails, go and listen to RunThrough Trails. I think that's probably a good place to start because the trail running world seems to be exponentially growing at this point. It just seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And when you started, James, with RunThrough, and you were first employed by the company, we didn't touch that at all. So now, being in your position, I guess to start with, explain what you do now at RunThrough, and then we'll get on to kind of the explosion in trail running down the line.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when I first started, I'd just moved back from Canada and I'd started training for road marathons. So I was like getting into road running properly. I'd never really run any road races. And just kind of chatted to Matt and Ben about that when I very first met them in like the second stage of my interview. Um, and straight away they were like, "Yeah, we want to get into trails." I think Ben had recently ran the 50K at Ultra Trail Snowdonia before it
Okay.
became a UTMB World Series race. And Matt had run like Race to the Stones or something, another big ultra in the UK. And they were both hooked, and they were like, "Yeah, we can see where this is going. We want to get into it, but it's not really our thing. You're into trail running. Why don't you get on with it?" And like everything at RunThrough, kind of moves quite quickly. Find someone who's got an interest and let them just dive into it. And actually, my predecessor Liam, who was the logistics manager in the North team at the time, had started to draft the first ever Lady Bower route, and it was like the very first part of the loop had been made, and there was a logo and a website, and that was about it. And from then, it just kind of took off. But yeah, in terms of what I do at RunThrough now, it's evolved quite a lot over the last 3 years. So part of my job is global COO, so I'm overseeing mainly the European and American expansion at the moment, and helping with the recruitment and kind of the adoption of all of the UK processes. Basically, we've got a really good business model in the UK, and we want to put that in other countries and see how it does. And our 10-year target as a business is every runner in the world has heard of RunThrough, and our kind of core focus, our mission, our why do we get out of bed and come to work is to inspire active nations through running. So the more people we can reach and the more people we can share our passion for running with, the more people we can get active through the sport, the better. So I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to do.
I love when people come to events, and I think we'll get onto this when we talk about yesterday's race, because you actually raced one of technically your races yesterday, which was amazing. People often just see like the finished product, right? Like they see the morning when like they get to the event village, then they get on the start line, they do the race, they get their medal, they go home. And it's interesting when you were saying about that first Lady Bower route then, because I actually remember speaking to Ben, one of the founders, at Tatton Park. I was hosting a race there years ago before we really talked about it, or probably just in the same stages as then. And he was like, "Oh, we've got this race that we want to do in Lady Bower, but we're trying to talk to a farmer about getting parking in a field." And it's
I
like,
remember the field. Yeah.
these are the little things that like people don't think about on the actual day, all these logistical moving pieces behind the scenes, but there is just so much to deal with in the organization of something like a big trail race, isn't there?
I mean, the evolution of RunThrough, we always talk about the first ever event that RunThrough did, which was Matt and Ben doing everything at Bushy Park. I'll get
Yeah.
it wrong, but Ben always talks about how he was the timer, the lead bike, the marketing person, and every course marshal all in one. And he was just rushing around, kind of, startup style, like just trying to work it out. They were chipping the bibs themselves and, hazard tape to make a start funnel and just kind of working it out. But I think that's a really cool way to do it, because I'm actually experiencing a very similar thing now with Europe, where I'm doing a lot of things that I never had to do, because in the UK, the team's so big, it's quite structured and departmentalized, and people have their specific focus. Whereas in Europe, there's like two of us, maybe three. So I'm learning a lot about the areas of the business that I didn't understand before, and I think it will make me a lot better at my job. Um, so yeah, there's a lot that goes into it behind the scenes, and that was say like that was a 10K park run style event in Bushy Park, and then it evolved all the way through into road closed city centre marathons, and then that transferred into, well, how do we do a trail race? And now that's transferred into how do we do 100K in the French Alps with 1,500 people? So it just adds layers of complexity.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get onto that, but I think it probably is good just to give a little bit of your backstory as well. Like I know people that are listening on the Run Through Trails feed would have probably just heard the Ian and Fran episode, and you do get into it a little bit in that. But for people listening on Gone Running on that feed, just kind of take me back to when you were living in Canada and kind of you weren't in a place where you ever thought you'd be winning a 50K in a insane time, which we'll get into. Were you like talk me through that kind of part of your life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've done one with Lewis on the Run Through Trails podcast before, and it was on the New Levels podcast too. So if you want to hear the full story with all the
Yeah.
details, I'd recommend going and listening to that. It's almost like a whole podcast in and of itself. But I suppose in terms of the moving to Canada and around that period, it was a whole process of like having a certain life, having a certain lifestyle, doing a certain job that I did all out of university, and essentially not having a very active lifestyle at all, not being massively motivated about work, really about anything, just kind of ticking over in life and not really being satisfied with that. And then over a period of time, changing a lot of things, and that evolved into me being someone who was a lot more healthy, a lot more active. I was putting myself out there doing things that were way outside my comfort zone, including like backpacking and traveling and doing a load of different sports and activities that I had never done before, which led me down a path when I was living in Canada to trail running, because I was working as a ski guide. I hadn't grown up in the mountains like all of my colleagues had, and I would go to these like ski guide exams and be tested on all these different things. It's crazy. It's like a 7, 8 year process. It's like becoming a doctor. It's ridiculous. Not exactly the same, but whatever.
Yeah, you're not
A lot
operating
of
on me, mate.
no. Okay, fine. But these guys are like way more experienced, way more. They're just growing up in the mountains, and I
Yeah.
didn't have that. And I thought, what's the one thing that's in my control that I can tip the scales with? I thought, if I'm the fittest person there, I can get to the top first, and I can buy myself another 5 minutes to work everything out. So that was the thing, and the method to do that through the summers was trail running, because it was the most appropriate thing that transferred to that sport in the winter. But yeah, I literally started out with a book by Steve House, reading about like nose breathing and easy runs and weighted hikes and stuff, and then it just snowballed from there. Like I think with anything, as you start to get good at something, you start to get interested in how can I do it better? How can I run further? How can I run faster? Maybe I'll do a race. But yeah, I had no interest in doing a race, or I didn't even wasn't even in my mind. I was just going out
Yeah.
running for health.
It's a different world though, isn't it? Sort of that alpinism world. Like when you're in that and you're I guess surrounded by that, it's unless you've grown up with it, I think it's sometimes difficult to get into. So when you're out in Canada, that must have been like very exciting, but at the same time like quite scary because there's a lot to do there. There's a lot to think about.
Yeah, totally. Well, it started when I lived in Chamonix, and I was already a snowboarder. I'd always snowboarded my whole life, so I was good at the downhill bit. But then I realized, oh, people climb mountains and
Yeah.
ski down them. That's cool. Oh, you do it with skis on your feet, so you start to learn all this stuff. But like Chamonix is called the whatever adventure sport capital of the world for a reason, because 50 to 60 people die per year in paragliding accidents and crevasse falls and avalanches. So I was quite naive in a pretty dangerous place, and luckily I kind of had a load of mentors and people and friends who understood a lot more about that world than I did. And so they could get me to the scary stuff so I could ski down it. And that progressed into a thing of like, I would really like to be proficient at this and take other people to these places. How does that work? Oh, you can be a mountain guide. That sounds like the absolute dream. How do I do it? And then all of a sudden you've got this 5 year roadmap in front of you, which took me to Japan, took me to the US, took me to Canada, and kind of had to build this resume and learn all these skills, which was an amazing part of my life, and still probably in my mind is like one of the best jobs in the world, being a mountain guide, taking people out to these incredible places. But in and of itself comes with a lot of stress and pressure, and can be pretty scary and pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
But yeah, feels like a different life now. It's,
Do you
yeah,
find
weird.
it hard to stay still though? Because like you're throwing all these different places at me, and I knew that you'd lived in some of those places. I didn't know that you'd lived in others. Like we'll get on to Europe and like kind of your next adventure as a family towards the end of this podcast, but like it does feel like you've done a lot. Like you've moved a lot of different places. Has that always been part of your personality? That kind of not wanting to stay still type thing.
Weird, really, because I'm quite a routine person. I like
Okay.
routine. I like to cook my food, eat the right food, do my training, go to sleep on schedule, like that kind of athlete mentality, I guess. I think I'm more suited to that. But then also we've just found ourselves traveling around. I think my wife Nicola was always a very like what's the word? Indecisive is not the nice way of putting it, but she'll like want to do something for a year or two and then kind of be attracted by something else and want to try
Okay.
different things, experience life, wants to make the most of things. And so I think that's rubbed off on me. And then I've always been I get into a new hobby or activity or challenge and I dive fully into it. So I think those two things combined, she wants to travel. And I've got this crazy idea of like, I'm going to be a mountain guide. I'm going to be a dive master. I'm going to be a professional runner. And so those two things combine and they just take us to places, which is cool. Yeah, it
Yeah,
definitely
I
adds
mean,
to the variation of life.
yeah, no, I think that's a really good way of looking at it, isn't it? Like whatever Nicola's philosophy is, that kind of experience in life, because it's so cliche to say, and so many people say it, but like you only do this whole thing once, so like you do need to do as much as you can when you are here, and I think that's
Absolutely.
so important. And mate, you're certainly filling it up. We'll touch on
Trying
yesterday
to.
before we move on to Europe. So for people that don't know, just tell people where you raced yesterday. Tell them kind of what the goal was going into the race, and
Yeah.
I guess take me back as well to the creation of it.
Cool. Yeah. So for me, well, I would class myself as a 50K trail runner. Like if I had to kind of put a title on it. And I think for me, I've kind of landed on that 40 to 60 kilometers, like 3 to 5 hours of racing is kind of, I think, where I can excel. And so that's been the focus for me for the last couple of years, moving to the trails with Lewis and with new levels and trying to pursue that. And I've had a little bit of a rocky last sort of 6 to 9 months. Anyone who followed like the Road to UTMB story and has watched any of the trails content will have seen that I had a few like niggling injuries, nothing crazy, but it was last year was kind of riddled with little niggles and injuries. So the last time I actually completed a 50K race was last June in Annecy at European Championships, which was my first time running for GB, which is incredible. But even during that race, an hour into a 6 hour race, I thought I tore my hamstring. And so I was fully just survival mode, like limping around the whole race. So I finished it very happy that I'd finished. And I probably wouldn't have finished if I wasn't racing for GB. Because in my head, I was just thinking, how do you get this once in a lifetime opportunity to represent your country and then DNF after an hour? That is so embarrassing. I would rather horrifically injure myself just finishing the race. And so anyway, limped around it and actually was okay. And then I was supposed to race OCC last year, went into it with an injury and DNF. So that was quite disappointing because that was a big goal, UTMB week. And then this spring I went to California to race Canyons 50K and got COVID on the flight over. So it's kind of like a litany of like comical kind of issues. But anyway, what it's done is left me in a place right now where I'm healthy. I've got no injuries. I'm not feeling like peak fitness, but I'm in a decent, got a good base. I would say I'm like ready to go into a training block. And I'm supposed to be racing JFK 50 miler in Maryland, which is November time. So that's kind of like a big A goal for the year. And so Lewis, Coach Lewis, co-host, everyone knows Lewis, just said it'd be cool to do a 50K in the summer sometime, and Tittersworth came up. So yeah, Run Through Trails Tittersworth Water was yesterday, Sunday the 6th of July. That was the fourth edition. It was the first ever ultra distance race that we put on at Run Through Trails. I designed the course, planned the event, and I've helped deliver it for the last 3 iterations. And I've actually never all out raced a run through event in my life. I've run hundreds of them, but I've never trained for and raced one. And so yesterday I had the pleasure of turning up to an event, which I've played a big part in kind of putting together in the early stages and got to race it, which was really cool in loads of different ways, let alone not just the race itself, but the experience of, yeah, it was surreal. I mean, we'll get into it now, but it was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
surreal running on a route that you've designed for yourself.
Yeah, I picked up on a couple of things yesterday that I'll definitely touch on. I just want to mention we were on a call, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago when you said that you were going to run the 50K, and somebody said to you, "Oh, make sure you don't go wrong." Like you've basically set the route, and you just literally said 100% confidence. It was like, mate, there is no way I'm going wrong. Like when you were up there yesterday, the one thing I picked up on was you said to me at the finish line, you were like, I was smiling the whole way. Like I can't believe that I'm getting to do this type vibe. Like what was the feeling out on the trail? Because this is something that's come from your mind, and now you're in essence racing it. Like that
Yeah,
must have felt quite special, quite a cool connection.
100%. Like there was kind of four phases to the race, and this was phase three. So we'll skip forward to phase three, then we'll go back. I kind of like when you're racing for multiple hours out there. I'm sure you do the same, Ben. Especially like you were telling us yesterday that you've done a 24-hour track race. So I'm sure you've had a lot of time to think whilst running in various events. But I spend quite a lot of time. I actually mentioned it to Caleb last week on the podcast as well. Um, you got a lot of time in your own head, and I never listen to music and stuff when I race, but I always do when I train. I listen to podcasts and music and stuff. But racing, I never do, and I find that I end up spending a lot of that time distracting myself with little inner narratives, and it gives you so much time to think. And so I always end up having the storyline of what's unfolding almost playing in the back of my head whilst I'm running. I don't know why; it just kind of naturally happens. And anyway, through the race yesterday, there was a period specifically from the second aid station at Grabbatch Car Park all the way through the third aid station and back around towards Three Shires Head. I call it Rob's Loop. It's this 10-mile section that Rob has historically marked and flagged. And the route's great, but it's my less favorite part of the route because I really like the roaches and I really like the trails through the woods around the back. And this one's a bit more moorland, a bit more peaks, a bit bleak, a bit exposed, a bit grassy, a bit more challenging. And around that whole part, I had a really nice kind of 90 minutes of just grinning to myself where I was thinking, I'm running at an event that to me is world class. Like I'm enjoying this as much as I would any other event I've ever been to. The markings are perfect. The loads of people fed back yesterday that the attitude and like energy of the volunteers and marshals was amazing yesterday. Everyone was really happy despite the weather and challenging conditions. It just felt really nice, the atmosphere. There were extra marshal positions on course, which really did add to the atmosphere and remove a kind of couple of tricky junctions we've struggled with in the past. And the aid stations were great. And then I've got the bonus of like, I know everyone. So it's really nice because everyone's like, oh, come on, James. Well done, James. So I'm seeing marshals that I've not seen for ages because now I live down in Surrey. I'm not up north very often. I'm seeing all the staff that I know. My wife's the course photographer. You're emceeing. It's like it's surreal. It's weird. How many people get the opportunity to create an event from scratch, all the way from the route to the marshal positions to the layout of the event village. I bought the carpet. I designed the gantry. Like whatever. And then I'm taking part in the race, winning it, and just
Yeah.
enjoying every minute of it. Like it was crazy. I don't know that anyone's ever had that experience before. It can't be
No,
a common experience anyway.
no, honestly, like it was so cool to see. Like it was a really, and when we welcomed you to the podium, like I wanted to make a bit of a fuss because that's the thing. It's like it's a sick thing. Like I think people listening to this, and yeah, go and check out some of the photos on James's Instagram, the footage on RunThrough Trails on the Instagram as well, because you always do an amazing job in documenting every race. But yesterday even looked spectacular in the weather that we had, which I think is a testament probably to the course and also the team that were there doing it as well. But yeah, I think what was interesting yesterday is like you kind of go through what's happened in your race calendar the last three races, and it hasn't been ideal in the slightest. And I think a race like this was either going to go one of two ways, wasn't it? In terms of mindset going into it, you could have seen it as more pressure because it is your race. It is a race you've designed. It is this and it is that. And if it didn't go well, that would feel really crap. Or you could go into it in the way in which I think you went into it, which was pretty chill in the time intent before, getting changed, getting out there, go into it and enjoy it. Like, did you go into it feeling like that? Was it kind of like a no pressure run? How did it
I
feel
wasn't
that morning?
gonna, I wasn't gonna not win.
Yeah, okay.
Like so, I went into it like that. I mean, it's really hard with this stuff because the last thing you want to sound is cocky or anything like that. But I quite like because none of it matters, right? Like if I blow up and don't finish, I'm mildly embarrassed for 5 minutes. No one really cares. Like they do, but they don't. Obviously, people are happy when you do well. Your friends want to see you do well. The team wants to cheer you on, and it's a cool thing. But if you don't do well, or you don't finish, or you get injured, or you DNS, like no one really cares. No one thinks any differently of you. It doesn't really matter. But for me, I kind of want it to matter. So I quite like to add a bit of pressure um, by having confident predictions. So I was definitely saying to people beforehand, you get the joking back and forth with people at work and stuff. And I was very much like, oh, I'm coming to win. Like I want to win it. I think I'll win it. Um, and you never know who's going to come because Andy Hayes rocks up around the 22. And if he decided to run the 50, then maybe I wouldn't be winning it. But yeah, no, I went in wanting to win it, but also again being completely transparent, feeling somewhat confident that I could, just from my experience of the fields that we get, the runners we get at our events. We get a really good range of runners, and we do have very strong people show up. But in complete reality, we're not hosting multiple professional level runners on a regular basis at the events. I say that, we just had Phil Sessman run the 5K at Battersea the other week, so we do get it. But with the trail races and stuff, you get the odd outlier name here and there. But I went into it confident for sure, and the plan was to do it as like a hard, steady run that would end up feeling like race effort, but I wanted to go into it like a race simulation. So I did taper, not fully, but a little bit. And I did carb load again, not fully, but a little bit. And I tried to have the morning as I would pre-race, but it wasn't totally the same because, like you say, it's pretty chill. You chat to people. I drove in with Nicola. If this was like my A goal race of the year, there's some things I would treat differently for sure. But I certainly showed up with the intention to try very hard and run the best race I could. Yeah.
Do you think you'll take some of what you did this time around, though, in terms of that kind of relaxed feel and sort of push towards what you wanted to do into the next race? Because it clearly worked.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, but you're right. Like I probably should. Like post race, I came back and I chatted to Lewis afterwards, and he was like, Ceci, that's a really good time. Like that was a really good run. And I looked back and compared it. I think the last race that I feel like I had a great performance at, for me, and even that, there's always room to improve. But the last race where I can truly say like I ran a really good race was Kullermanen, which was a year and a half ago in Sweden when I qualified for OCC. And I podiumed and I got the points I needed. And it was like all dramatic and cool and blew up in the last 8K. And I was leading this race in this. Anyway, whatever. Go watch the vlog. It's on YouTube. And I looked back at my average pace and we used the Munter rate, and I ran faster yesterday. And I really did not feel like I was trying as hard, which is amazing. Like I really wasn't expecting that. So yeah, maybe going in a little bit more chill and taking it a bit less seriously is a good thing.
3:49 flat for anybody that's wondering. But yeah, do go and check out some of the highlights on the Instagram, on James's Instagram, on the RunThrough Trails Instagram as well. I want to get into Europe because there's so much to get into here. We might come back and touch on a little bit more about this, but I don't want to. I really want to give Europe quite a lot of focus as well. Something you just said actually when we were talking about racing, that I want to put a little bit of pressure on myself. I think a lot of people have that, and actually I can kind of pick that up, just that feeling, and put it on Europe. Right, I want to put a little bit of pressure on myself because doing what you're doing now and delivering these events in places that you've never delivered events before, with a language barrier, with new teams, with people from every facet of these venues that you need to deal with, in a place where a lot of the time it's very different culturally to where we're used to. I would say that's probably putting a little bit of pressure on yourself. So take me back to when you decided Europe was the right thing to do. And then I want to touch on the first European event, Girona, before then we kind of move forward to talk about Morzine as well.
Cool. Yeah. So, the growth of the trail events in the UK, specifically Ladybower, and the potential we saw in that event over the last couple of years, how well the numbers have grown and how well kind of the Summit Series RunThrough Trail events 2024 were received. So we all kind of got together in January, the Trails team, like a group of staff who were particularly passionate about trail running, of which it turns out actually the whole company is really keen and everyone wants to be involved, which is awesome. But at the time, there was a small number of people who were specifically trail runners. That's how they would have identified. And so we went away in to a little youth hostel in Surrey, and we spent a weekend together. And I wanted to get everyone together and essentially like give a bit of accountability, brainstorm, like some values, some ideas for the business, and what makes a great trail event. What events have you run in the past that you particularly remember, and what made them special, and how can we take those things and make our event special? So we did this little kind of think tank, and then we all came out of it super motivated. And that's where things like GPS tracking for everybody, the post race meal vouchers, the stretch tents and benches to try and keep people in the event village for more atmosphere, trying to create the best marked courses in the world and strive towards that as a genuine goal, because that's, you can do that, you just have to constantly improve. Like, that's a controllable. And all these different things, the new medals, the, you know, the 3D wooden trophies, the just everything, every little thing, the elevation profile on the bib. We wanted to do everything better, the carpet, the gantry, whatever. And we just saw through last year that how well that was received, and all of a sudden all the staff are walking around wearing the RunThrough Trails hoodies, and it started to become like a cool thing, and I really started to feel like it could be its own brand. I mean, it is its own brand, but like it's a separate thing from RunThrough. And it just kind of led me down a path of, like, for me, I love running in the UK, and there's some spectacular locations, and we've got great events all over the country. But if I'm going to be completely honest, if I'm going to sign up to an A goal race for the year, the chances of that is in the UK. Again, I'm in a fortunate position. I can travel and for races and all this stuff. So assuming that that's open to you, which it is to most people nowadays in the modern world, if you plan far enough ahead, there are lots of cool places in the world where you can go and run. And a lot of those places for me are in Europe. And so personally, like, it's a bit of the travel and a bit of having lived in these places before. I just wanted to share that with our audience, and I wanted to find a way to kind of see if we could take the business into Europe, and how we could do that. And I mentioned earlier, our 10-year target is every runner in the world has heard of RunThrough. We're about 2.5 years into that target. So what are we doing about it? You know, like, we're massive in the UK, but lots of countries around the world have never heard of us. The vast majority, obviously, the vast majority. So anyway, this was a vehicle to do that, coupled with my own selfish kind of want to spend more time in these amazing places and to share them with people, and also the fact that I think there's a huge market. People are trying to sign up for UTMB World Series events. They're selling out, and they cost a lot of money. So supply and demand must dictate that there's demand for more events than there is supply. So we'll put those events on, because that's kind of what we do.
And we've started to put those events on. So let's go back to event number one, because there's got to be a bit of nervous energy, right, going into something like that, something that we've not done before. Like, as I said, like the cultural differences, in terms of just the general organization of an event, and somewhere you've never organized an event before. Yeah. Like, there's so many different things that you need to think about. Where was your kind of head at going into that first event? Were you like, I don't know how this is going to go? Or were you very much like nailed down, this is going to work?
No, I was very anxious with Girona specifically. It's the idea on paper makes a lot of sense. I don't know, it works. And putting a business plan together and planning the events and coming up with ideas, it's all easy. It's hard work, but it's easy to do. But the difficult thing is to get people there and then to deliver it properly. And so we had everything in place, and now the reality of doing it is approaching. And in my mind, I had this California trip for Canyons lined up, and I knew 6 months ago that get to Canyons, run that race, come back, and then it's all about getting Girona delivered well and setting off on the right foot in Europe. And when I got back from California, we had a really nice trip, despite the illness and stuff. We had a great time, and it was okay, full focus on this now. And it was scary. It was definitely scary. There's so many unknowns. And for me, the way that I kind of tackled that is to surround myself with the best possible people I could. So Ed, who's working with me on the European events, operations manager based out in Morzine, has been absolutely incredible. Like, the pace that he's picked up stuff is shocking. He's been excellent. So having Ed there was great. But then I also just have this amazing team of, you know, I've got 50 people I could choose from to take out there, and they're all amazing. And so selecting people who I've worked with, who I know and trust, who I know can go and deliver this type of event, who have the experience, and sitting down with them a month out from the event and just honestly saying, like, this might be the hardest event we've ever delivered. There's so many unknowns. I don't know what's going to happen. Yes, it's just an event, but like you just said, Ben, there's so many other factors that we've never experienced before. And so you guys are coming because I trust you, and I know that you're able to make good decisions and solve problems, and I know that you're as passionate about making it good as I am. And so I need you to second guess everything I say, ask every question in the world, and just this won't work without you guys being engaged with it. And obviously, they absolutely smashed it. So if it was just me, it couldn't happen. So yeah, just had to trust these guys to be on it, and they were.
You just said you sat out a month before the event and said, this might be the hardest event that we've ever put on. I know for a fact that's not the case now, because what we're going to talk about in a minute. But at the time, was it the hardest event you've ever put on?
Girona, it's so weird, man. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. No, it probably wasn't. No,
Okay.
it probably wasn't. I've had very stressful UK events as well. Challenging, let's say, instead of stressful.
Okay.
The one that comes to mind, I mean, I don't know. We'll talk about it, because why not? But there's a particular, I mean, everyone knows what happened. There's a particular event in Gloucester where it was just loads of stuff all came together, where Rob's wife was giving birth a little bit early. And so he was pulled away from the event. So I was called up to work it, and I didn't really know, I wasn't fully prepped. So had a rushed preparation, and I rocked up to help the team. And it was a new event to us, with a lot of people, with a lot of complex road closures in a town where we'd never operated before. Part of the route went over a bridge, and for whatever reason, we weren't aware that there was a chance this bridge might be raised during the event. Or actually, I should say, we were told it definitely wouldn't be. And also, Mark Scott was running this race as a half marathon, as his final race prep before he ran his debut at London Marathon. So not a small thing, right? It's a big deal for us. And yeah, the bridge went up during the race. And so I'd say that was probably one of the most stressful events I've ever worked. So no, it probably wasn't as stressful as that in the moment, but in terms of the overall workload throughout the entire week, it was a beast. But great team, beautiful place, lovely weather, and we gave ourselves enough time to do it. So no, each day was manageable, but the volume of work as a whole was challenging. But no, it was smooth. Girona was very, very smooth. Like, yeah, I was really happy with how that was delivered.
And it's so cool, because that's one of those places at the moment that's kind of angling itself and becoming this kind of home of endurance. I know it has been for a very long time, but there's so many people visiting, and you're often seeing it almost has that Chamonix feel, in terms of like people going out there to do stuff, which is really cool. So to have an event, the first European event, in such a flagship place is very cool as well.
That's
What was
exactly
it?
why we chose it as a
Yeah.
venue, Ben.
Oh,
Because
right,
I'd never really, I've been to Barcelona a few times in the past. I'd never really heard of Girona. Certainly hadn't been
okay.
there. And I was watching like Jan Frodeno triathlon videos
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
YouTube, and he had a place out there, and all of a sudden, I'm just seeing Girona everywhere with regards to triathlon and cycling. And I know a lot of those guys run a lot on the trails for training. So I went out with Nico and Amelia for a holiday, and instantly I was like, I could live here. This is the coolest
Yeah,
place
yeah,
ever.
yeah.
It's not a hidden gem, but for trail runners, I think the potential of that place is absolutely enormous for a million different reasons. But yeah, definitely somewhere hopefully we can help put on the map as a destination trail race, because the place is incredible.
And cool as well in terms of like terrain for that first event, all very runnable. Like I know there were, some good athletes turn up and some decent times as well. And finishing that race, whether you were at the front of the pack or the back of the pack or the middle of the pack, I'm sure would have felt very, very special for the people running, but for you as well, like seeing this thing come to life, this first European event in person, those big chunky medals, which look unbelievable, the European medals, like
Yeah.
hanging around all these people's necks. This thing's become reality from your brain again, like kind of like the 50K you just ran yesterday. Like, what was that feeling like at the end of it?
Oh man, it was surreal. It was crazy. I just keep going back to hearing the MC just s- speaking Spanish with Run Through Trails thrown in every now and again, and just like, what is happening? Looking up at the cathedral in the background, like it's where they filmed the scene in Game of Thrones. You know, the shame scene where they're walking the woman down the steps. That's
Yeah,
right there.
let's
It's
hope
like
that didn't
I,
happen at the event.
I didn't get shamed down the steps, luckily.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's just such a cool, like it's the kind of place, like you said with Chamonix. There's some places in the world that you go to and you feel lucky that you're able to be there,
yeah,
and
100%.
it feels like that just a visit. To put on an event that's so integrated with the community and be partnered with companies like Chance and people like Tom Austin and Christian Meyer, who are involved with that company, as well as with Overland, with Alesh and the guys at Fuel, with the city of Girona, like to have all those guys affiliated, to have the city of Girona Arch, all the partner branding. Yeah, man, it was a privilege.
and that's something that I always come back to as well. That kind of without vehicles of going to these places, sometimes you won't go to these places. So I think like for you at the moment, obviously you've been to a lot of these places anyway, but the European events for RunThrough Trails are that vehicle to get you to these incredible places. I'll just mention quickly, I paced my friend Scott, who's actually been on this podcast, on your Trails podcast. I paced him out in Moab 2 years ago, I think, when he was doing Moab 240. And like, I was out there, and when you're pacing, I think I did 70 miles over 48 hours or something.
I remember
And
watching on your Strava. Yeah,
mate, and like, I remember like looking up at times and thinking there is absolutely no way that I would ever have come to the top of Shea Mountain in the middle of the night and seen this if I hadn't have been in this position to be, one, able to do it, and two, have met this person. I actually met him through another podcast, to be able to go and do something so cool as that. And I think that's the fundamental feeling at the end of lots of these races, or when you're working these races, is like, I wouldn't be here without this thing.
You're exactly right. I had this exact conversation. So my best mate is over visiting at the moment. He's over from Australia with his partner Rosie, and they don't really run and stuff, but they're active and they do different things. And obviously, they're like, "Oh, what do you use today? Oh, I ran a 50K. Oh, how did that go? Oh, I won it." And they just kind of don't really know what you even mean. So then we start chatting about, and they know what I do and stuff, but like you don't really get it if you don't do it. Um, and now that like I'm sending them links to buy trail running shoes, and they're going to go and give it a go. And I was trying to explain some of the things that make it cool, because a lot of things make it hard. Obviously, it's not an easy, super accessible sport. Well, it isn't. It
Yeah.
is and it isn't. But one of the things I was saying to them was exactly what you just said there. Is like there's something special about doing something where it's the most efficient way to do a thing. And what I mean by that is like I've had moments, and one comes to mind consistently, which was in Gran Canaria in 2024. Went out with Lewis and Gemma, another race that I didn't race because I was injured. So like another example of last year being a bit messy. But went out to run the Trans Gran Canaria 42K, and was with Gemma and Lewis, and had had a bit of an injury, but it was just kind of clearing up. And we went out for a run on the course, and I kind of went for a bit of a steady run up this climb. And Gran Canaria's got really unique kind of in geography and flora and fauna, and it's quite like desolate and cool and really rocky. And I was just in the sun, shirt off, running up this trail, loving life, come off the back of an injury. So you already feel kind of like boosted on endorphins and stuff. Anyway, Lewis and Gemma have gone off in a different direction. I get to the top of the climb. I sit on this big rock. There is no one around. I'm in a place that I would never have been. Probably a place that not many people go to. You could only get there by walking or running to it. And I was like, sat in the sun in this amazing place with this spectacular view on my own, having run up there, just thinking, the places that running and
Yeah.
trail running take you to. And it was exactly the same with skiing and ski mountaineering. Like you stood on top of these peaks and about to ski down, just think that there's no other way to be here right now. Like the road to acquire the skills and fitness, and then the effort to do this, makes it such a unique experience that you feel so like it feels so special. And yeah, trail running's the same thing, mate. There's so many times in races or out on training runs or whatever, you're in these amazing places that you wouldn't be in if you hadn't gone there for a run, and they just stick with you. They're just special moments.
I think people might be experiencing the same thing as I am, but like I genuinely got like little goosebumps then. But I think that's the because I know those moments, because I've been in those moments and I felt those moments, and like in this country a lot as well, like going over to Snowdonia. I'm based just outside of Wrexham, so like I'm pretty close to Snowdonia, or getting brought up in the Beacons. That's why I'm so excited about RunThrough Trails coming to the Beacons, because like I've been there. Like I helped set a route that was 75 mile around the Beacons. I know some of these places that are like insane, and I know the feeling that people are going to get when they go to these places. And I think almost it's quite funny that you said about your best mate there. That's almost better because you know it, and you're like, I want you to have this too. It makes it I don't know, passing that feeling almost feels very special. I think that's what you're doing on a greater scale when it comes to the trails events as well. Like, you're taking all these people to all these different places, which is cool.
Totally. That's what Run Through is. That's exactly what we're talking about. Like that's the
Yeah.
mission of the company. That's what everyone comes to work every day to do. It's like they found this thing they love, and it's a huge part of their life. It makes them happy, and they want to share it with as many people as they can. Like, yeah.
Bouncing from Girona to Interlaken, which actually I feel like was probably the one that we probably won't talk about as much, even though it was unbelievably stunning, as all these places are. And I know I've said go and look at some of the videos 15 times already, but genuinely go and look at some of the videos. Like, it's insane. We'll jump over that and then we'll go straight to Morzine. But we'll mention it because there was kind of this period with those two European events that was super close together, right? Which is an extra challenge in itself. So coming off Girona and then going back out there and delivering these two events very close together, what kind of differing challenges did that lead to?
Yeah, quite a few actually. So Interlaken, with it just being a single day event in the end. So we had an up and down race, which was like a 12-kilometer kind of climb and back down. More service roady, runnable, but big climb, as a bit of a blast out for people who wanted to transition from road to trail type of stuff. Because a lot of the trails on the Hadegat Ridge, which made up a big section of the 21K and the 42K, just super rooty, technical, like awesome if you're into trail running, but not, well, quite challenging if you're not really a trail runner. So we got to offer something different. We're trying to do different formats of races. So had the up and down and the 21 and the 42K. And the main challenge with Interlaken in the lead up was the permissions. There's so many stakeholders, landowners, and the law in Switzerland, as with all these places, quite different from the UK. So the way we had to handle that stuff was challenging, specifically for Edge, who put a lot of time into making it happen. So it almost felt like the hump for Interlaken had already been crested by just being allowed to be there. Because it's one of those places where they don't really want more events and they have too many people. They're like, we're too popular, we're too good of a place, there are too many people, we don't really want you here. Whereas our pitch to most places is, we're going to bring loads of people. They're like, we don't care. We don't want We've got too many people. Go away. We don't want you here. And it's like, well, that's why we want to be here, because it's so cool. So anyway, other than like beautiful mountains, views of the Eiger and Jungfrau, and crazy bright blue turquoise lakes and unbelievable trails, so why would you not want to be there? The fact we could get this date felt, again, like a huge privilege, like something we should grab onto. And so we felt a lot of pressure to deliver it to a degree that was acceptable to these guys and was above and beyond what we'd normally do. But the main challenge was that really was, how do we take out a team of people to deliver an event in Interlaken, which right now we're kind of shrugging off as like, oh, it's only a marathon, but it's a marathon in the mountains in Switzerland. It's no different from what we just did at Tittersworth yesterday, which 12 months ago was some of the most challenging events we'd ever delivered. So it shows how that bar moves, and that level of what's easy and acceptable and manageable. Easy is not the right word. Lowers and raises as you do different things. But it was, how do you take a team out, deliver the event, and have them recovered enough to then do the biggest week of work that they're ever going to do, which we knew Morzine was going to be before we went, and it turned out to be more than that even. And it was, I mean, it came true on the first day of course sale when Katie and Kirsten went out to mark this particularly technical section of the ridge, and Katie rolled her ankle. And so one of our 4 course marking staff now can't walk on day one of like a 2-week trip. So how do you mitigate that? So all these things that we hadn't really factored played into it. But yeah, I mean, to skip over through Interlaken quickly, it went really smoothly. It was delivered amazingly well. The venue was incredible. The place is just stunning. So I think now with the content that's out there, being able to share what it actually looked like with our runners is going to attract a lot more people out there. So it was really good. It had its own challenges. We had crazy thunder and lightning storms and 30-degree weather on the same day, which was mental. But relatively smooth. It felt very similar to a single day UK ultra distance trail event that we would do, Summit Series style, but just in a more stunning place. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I didn't actually, I've probably been a bit naive to places like Interlaken, if I'm being honest. And like, there's no shame in that. It's never really come across my radar. And you end up seeing this, and you're like, is that real? You know, it's like, that looks like it's AI. It changed, like that place.
No,
just
actually
looks
does.
insane.
It looks like you've color graded the photo so the lake looks that color. But like, trust me, it's that color. Like, it's weird.
It's mad.
It doesn't even look real.
It doesn't look real at all. Right, let's go into Morzine, because there's so much here that we need to unpack. We could probably do a whole nother episode, but we'll try and get as much of it in as we can. To start with, like, getting there, right? Because this is a multiple day event. You've just come from Interlaken. You've gone to Morzine. You've got the same team, as you said. What was that process like of kind of pack down, get to the next place? reset, go again. Like how did you kind of structure that first part of it?
Yeah, it was challenging. So Morzine was happening throughout Interlaken. So we have what we call an event timeline, and it's like a big part of what decides how we're going to deliver the event week. And so it's a spreadsheet with every single task that needs to be done with a time next to it and people assigned to those tasks. So a big part of my job in these event weeks and the prep up to them is to create this timeline. And normally for an event, the timeline is just the event day. But what we started to realize for Girona, Morzine, Interlaken, the timeline starts 3, 4, 5 days out. So the Morzine timeline was being created whilst we were in Interlaken. The volunteer positions were being assigned. The food shop orders were going in to promo cash in Morzine on the Thursday of Interlaken week. So the guys are going out in Interlaken mode. Most important thing you've ever done, deliver this event to the best possible quality, and then coming back and having to switch gears into planning for Morzine before they'd even delivered Interlaken. So that in and of itself was challenging. But again, the people we take, all of the staff at RunThrough, this is what they do day in, day out. And it's deceptively difficult thing to do, but they kind of, they handle it incredibly well. So that was the first challenge, was just trying not to be distracted by Morzine, but making sure that everything was in place whilst also delivering Interlaken. And the nice thing with the format of Interlaken, because the longest distance was a 42K, is we did it what I would say like old school style. So we tail swept. We didn't have trackers on the runners for the 42 because it wasn't an ultra. Then we do GPS trackers for 50K and longer as kind of standard policy. So we tail walked and stripped the course during the day. So when the back marker finished, when the last runner finished before the cutoff, our last staff member walked over the line 10 minutes after, and the course was cleared. So pack down happened that night, and we were actually done 8 p.m. So we did our little team selfie in front of the venue, and then everyone decided, cool, we finished a bit early, let's go get some food. And then one of these things happened, which always happens on live events, where me and my dad wandered back over to the rental car and the battery was flat. And then we spent the next 4 hours in McDonald's trying to get through to 6 roadside assistance. So instead of sleeping and recovering and planning for Morzine, I was getting increasingly frustrated on hold with 6, trying to start the car because my dad had to fly back to the UK the next day. So it's like these weird little things that you cannot predict that always put you back. No matter what event it is, these are the things that inevitably happen. And so every time they happen, you mitigate it, you learn, and you find ways to make it smoother next time, which we do. But that wasn't the best start. And then so the guys had all packed down, and we essentially, that was on the Sunday night. Monday was going to be a rest, travel, transition day, and then we were straight back into it on Tuesday in Morzine. So everyone kind of traveled across. But the other piece was, for me, moving out with my family to Annecy, which we'll probably touch on afterwards, and we moved out in a month. The key collection day was the Monday after Interlaken before Morzine. So for me, it wasn't so much a rest day. It was a collect the keys for your new apartment, meet Nicola and Amelia, do school viewings. Anyway, whatever. A load of stuff that was kind of like, felt like work. So the day off was a super exciting, very high energy day where I didn't really feel tired because I was so psyched about like the excitement of all this life admin and getting the keys to the apartment, and everything was so incredible, and meeting Nicola and Amelia. But I didn't realize until that night quite how tired I was, and I hadn't really been able to recover. I'll throw this in there as well because it was just funny. So I was supposed to be then going to Morzine and stopping over on the Monday night so that I was there ready for the Tuesday. But I was really tired. I hadn't seen Nicola and Amelia as much as I wanted to. So I was like, I'm going to stay with them in Annecy. They're staying for a couple more nights. I'm just going to stay for the night and then set off early in the morning. That's fine. So we stayed in this weird little campsite caravan thing, went to the park, went in the lake, lovely, went to bed. I get up at 5 a.m., get in the van to drive to Morzine to prep for the most important week of work I've ever done in my entire life, with the entire team there waiting for me to come and begin. And there is a massive barrier on the campsite closed, and I'm trying to pin and I'm trying to fob, and Nicola's asleep and people are intense, and I'm driving back and forth in this bloody van on this gravel road. And it just like, I come to realize like you cannot leave this campsite until 7:30. You just can't. Like, you're locked in. It's impossible to leave. I mean, it didn't matter, but it was just, it started off. I started off on the back foot. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of how it started. And then we were in Morzine on Tuesday, and that's kind of where it began. We sat around, Ed knows a load of people in Morzine, and he got us a really good deal on this lovely chalet in Morzine. So we had this great space to work and to live. And we had the whole team out there. And we sat down and we got the timeline up on the screen. And the first thing we did is have a really honest, transparent conversation about, look, we just delivered an event, and during events, tempers get frayed, patience gets tested, your body gets tired. Like, who's got a niggle? Who's feeling sore? Who upset who? What happened that bothered you? When did James speak to you a little bit bluntly and you want to have it out now? Let's get all that out of the way right now, because we're about to go into a massive week. So let's make sure that the camaraderie is 100%. No one's stressed out with each other. And we had a really good chat. Um, and again, the team's just class. So you can have these conversations, and it's such a like healthy working environment. But you know, people you can't not rub people up the wrong way
Of
when
course.
you're in that intensive an environment. It just
And
is.
and it's like th- you're only doing that because you're passionate about what you're delivering, and like wherever that comes from, it is built on passion, right? And like you say, like when you're trying to deliver something that is so important not only to you but to everybody that's running it, like, and there's so many moving parts, there's so many things you've got to deal with, like starting the Morzine week tired as well. We'll touch on that because I don't think I've ever seen a man more tired post Morzine on a screen. Like, yeah, I was like, mate,
Mm.
you need to go to sleep. But like that, we'll get into that shortly. The kind of things that happened over the timeline of Morzine. I did just want to touch on quickly because like there are a lot of moving parts in this, right? Not only in the event side of your life, but we've already talked about your racing side, like the athlete side of James Tilley. We talked about the family side of James Tilley. We've talked about the travel side of James Tilley. Like, how is it balancing all this? Because it feels like there is a lot going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty full.
Yeah,
So there's not much capacity left. Like, I think I'm confident enough to know where the line is. And so when we get towards that line, and especially ordering priorities, like it's really difficult. But I think about my life as like my family, my job, and my running. And it for me comes in that order. Obviously, family's always going to come first. Um, and then beyond that, the life I want with my family is somewhat powered by my career and my work, but also my work isn't work, it's my life. I love it. I absolutely love what I do. The people I work with is incredible. So genuinely love that. And for me, I would love a world where, like, in a way, I was just a bachelor pro athlete living on my own, just training all the time, and where that could be the most important thing. Because in some ways, internally, selfishly, it kind of is, but it just simply can't be. And I think the last couple of years for me have been a learning process, and I've matured and realized you can't do everything to 100%. And I've had these conversations with, like, Lewis is a great person to talk to about this stuff, and with Nicola and whatever as well. And yeah, the training's taken a back seat this summer, and it was planned as such because we knew that if I tried to train 100% and be the family person 100% and put everything into work that I needed to, it would not work, and I would get ill, I would get injured, something would go wrong, relationships, events, whatever. It is not possible. So we went into this year knowing, right, the least important thing in the life triage is the training. So the training will take the back seat. So if it's a busy work week, I'm not going to kill myself to get a double in. I'm going to have a day off. Or if I can't do a session, I'm going to run easy. And that is going to compromise my performance. But of all the things, as much as that matters to me, like I started off the podcast by saying, no one really cares. It doesn't
yeah.
really matter. I'm not paying the bills with my running. It's a a selfish endeavor, not in a bad way, but it is. So yeah,
And
a
it's
bit
that,
of
but it's
bit
that
of
pressure
balance.
part of the conversation again, then, isn't it? Because, like, yes, I know, like you said, you're in a place now where you're ready to go into a big block for an A race if that's what you decide to do. But like, you've still gone and performed arguably better than you performed in maybe your best performance this weekend, even though it wasn't an A goal race, even though you weren't really racing. So it's like it's that weird balancing act with the athletic endeavor part of your life, isn't it? Like with everybody on varying levels. It's like I think sometimes you almost put too much into that, and actually taking a little bit out of it and stripping a bit back can almost help sometimes. Like it might create results that you didn't think were going to be possible by doing it this way.
Yeah, I think the longer the race is, the less of a physiology test it is, so the less the training kind of matters. So I was getting this massive time on feet. I've been up at altitude, like I've been through a very difficult, challenging period with Morzine. So yesterday felt like an absolute pleasure. It felt like a dream. Whereas maybe if life had been super easy and chill for the last 2 months and I'd just been training, that race would have been the hardest thing I'd done that month. But it wasn't even close. It was a joke. So maybe that helped a little bit. And also maybe just a little bit of like, if I was going to go and try and run a 5K PB yesterday, I would have not been even in the same stratosphere because I'm not fit enough to do that. But I think it shows how much of it is mental. It really is. It's such a massive component. And I could enjoy yesterday because it was a pleasure to be not injured. And I was just floating on a cloud of Morzine and Interlaken going so smoothly, and it just carried me around. Maybe
I,
it's a big
I,
piece.
I don't think easy and chill has ever been part of your personality, mate, if I'm being honest. You just said, if my life was easy and chill, I was like, I don't know if your life's ever been easy and chill. Let's set up Morzine then before we like actually talk about the event itself and the kind of weekend. For anybody that's listened to this and doesn't know, how is that event built? Like, talk me through the days, the distances, the event
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah, cool. So the vision was we want to do a multi-day event in Morzine-Avoriaz, that's going to bring people from outside France and people from outside the Haute-Savoie region as tourists to extend their summer season. So the pitch to Morzine, to the tourism board, to the communes, to the prefecture is, why would you let this British company come and put a race on in France? Why would you do that? And without stereotyping, like France kind of has been known to have that type of mindset. Like, well, why would we do that? Well, the reason is because your tourist location, your season kind of starts with the Passeport du Soleil, which is an enormous mountain bike event, 8,000 cyclists doing a big race all around the Port du Soleil region, of which Morzine-Avoriaz is one of the resorts. And that starts the weekend after the weekend that we planned the event. So we're going to extend your summer season by putting on a big event the weekend before. We're going to bring a load of people from outside the region and the country, and they're going to stay in hotels. They're going to spend money in restaurants. They're going to see how amazing Morzine is. They're going to come back for a ski holiday. Because Morzine's already got a great trail running event. I took part in it last year. In a way, they're a competitor of ours, but Bruno, who organizes that, works for the tourist office, and he's, intelligent enough and progressive minded enough to see that there's space for two different events with different character, with a different market. So that's what we pitched. And so with that in mind, we wanted to do the event over multiple days. So we decided to do a up and down race on the Friday evening with registration open all the way through the Friday to kind of build the buzz and get people into the town centre and really make it feel like a multi-day event. But on the Friday night race is a bit of a kickoff. The bars in the square are kind of packed. People are in the restaurant, so they're watching the race go off. So it's kind of cool. And then that leads us into the 100K race, which kicks off at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning. Biggest race we've ever done in terms of difficulty challenge, which we'll get into. And then a 25K race a few hours later on Saturday, using some of the same trails, but some different ones. And then rolling all the way through with a 24-hour cutoff on the 100K race. So final runners finishing 6 a.m. on the Sunday in the 100K. 2 hours later, the 50K kicks off. And that's like, I think it was a 14-hour cutoff, I'm pretty sure. And that would then finish late night Sunday. So kind of this continuous stream of runners coming in and out of town over the entire weekend, which hopefully brings tourism and revenue and interest and eyes and blah, 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 more exposure to the town. So please let us come and do this cool event, and please help us to do it.
And as with all of the events, huge setup, huge pack down.
Oh yeah.
Across, I think you were still packing down 2 days after, like 3 days
maybe
after.
4.
It was mad.
120 kilometers of trail in total we flagged, with almost 7,000 meters of elevation across that 120 kilometers. So yeah, I mean, the biggest course we'd ever flagged up to that point, excluding Girona, which was a different level of accessibility and a lot easier to do. It was like a 50K in the peaks. So
yeah, so like all of that, if you just take all of that, put it on paper, it's a big weekend, right?
Oh yeah,
a very, very, very big weekend. However,
biggest ever.
when you add in some of the stuff that you have to deal with, it makes it even bigger. What happened on Friday night?
Yeah, well, it's Thursday night. So, like I talked about with Interlaken, we are incredibly lucky to be able to go and run around these places. So we're a commercial business, we're a private company, we are a for-profit company. We're not a charity, we're not a local organization. So that with that comes a certain stigma, a certain expectation, and that expectation is You don't drain public services. You're not calling out search and rescue to rescue runners. All this needs to be done at your own cost. You are leaving the trails in a better condition than they were found, but you're also responsible for informing every single landowner on the entire route that you're coming and essentially having their buy-in, which is fair. They're public paths, public rights of way. You're allowed to use those paths, but you're a private company that's essentially potentially profiting from the event. So we have to be in communication with all these people, and that's landowners and mairies and communes and the police, but it's also farmers and the alpagists, which are essentially alpine farmers, people who have farms up in the mountains. And a lot of the trails go through these people's land. So a lot of Ed's job is to communicate with these people in advance and get their buy-in. And that's the same for any race organizer. And so you think you've spoken to everyone, and sometimes you haven't. And that's just the way it is. There's too many people involved. So on Thursday night, we found out one of the alpagists, one of the farmers, on a certain section of the 100k and 50k route, isn't too happy with us going through their land. And without getting into detail, they had been contacted, and I guess we hadn't had enough communication, and some stuff had been missed and whatever. No fingers pointed, but essentially they kind of said, you know what, we don't really want you to come through our land for a number of reasons. So the prefecture, which is like the county, basically said, and they're the boss. Like if they say you need to do this, we have to do it. Otherwise, we're never coming back. So they said, you can't go that way. We suggest this diversion. Okay, well, immediately I feel quite uncomfortable because I don't really want to divert a course on a 100k route in the mountains that's happening in 2 days when I've not seen it, I've not marked it, I don't know if it's safe, I've got a duty of care to the runners, and we've not even mentioned the conditions. It was 30 degrees. It was 30 degrees. So it implemented hot weather kit, and that was a huge concern. There was a race the weekend before in the Hout Gif in the next valley across, which had been cancelled because they'd run out of water on some aid stations. There'd been a drowning in a river nearby, unrelated to the event, but all the emergency services had been pulled in to deal with that drowning, unfortunately. And people were having heat stroke injuries, so they cancelled the event. So that's super fresh for us. We need to do it better, and learn from that. So the temperature was a huge concern anyway, on top of the complexity of the event. So anyway, quite concerned about last minute changes. So me and Lewis went out on the Friday morning. We reflagged this section. We filmed some content. We filmed some sections where there were fixed lines and a bit of exposure. It was on the edge of what I was comfortable with in terms of technicality, but I was comfortable with it. And we marked it, and it was stunning. Like, it was really beautiful. And the videos we took looked amazing. And we left comfortable. Like, okay, cool. We'll do this diversion. Changes the distance a bit. We need to communicate that to the runners. So we got an email out to the runners. Jamie and the guys helped massively. Hot weather kit, new route, minor changes. Because people put a lot of time and planning into these races, distances and splits and crews and fueling. Like, it's huge. So to make a change 2 days out, we don't want to have to do that. But we had to, and we did. So we did that, and that was good. That was Thursday. And then Friday, we had the up and down race and all the setup. So everyone's quite tired anyway, and they're kind of trying to conserve energy and be calm because we know we're going into Saturday, which will be huge. So up and down race delivered, everything really cool, perfect little tester event. The event village looks incredible, great feedback, everyone's smiling, everyone's happy, but we're kind of terrified of the next day. We're ready to go, like we're on edge, ready to go, like pre-race vibe, but times a million. So all the staff go home to the chalet to go to bed to rest. Me and Ed are finishing up stuff in the race control, which is upstairs in the tourist office overlooking the event village. And we're about to close the laptop, and we see an email come through, and that email says, that route change that we gave you yesterday, we don't really think it's safe, and also it still goes through this person's land. So you've either got to change the route or cancel the race, basically. Didn't really know how to react to that. I think anywhere else in the world, the reaction would have been, I'm going to continue closing the laptop, and then I'm going to deal with this afterwards, because actually I'm very comfortable with what we've done. All the stakeholders involved are happy. The medical team are happy. And to change it now at this point feels almost impossible to do safely. And so we're not going to, because it feels unreasonable to ask us to do that. And I would be comfortable standing in front of anyone and saying, we didn't do that because it was dangerous, and it wasn't fair to cancel because we'd done everything else that we were asked to do. But luckily, we're surrounded by some kind of very level-headed, calm people who know a lot more about, the French event space and the bureaucratic system than I do. And I sat down with Ed, sat down with Bruno from the Health 4, from the tourist office. sat down with the medical team. We got some people, some representatives from the prefecture on the phone. We spoke to some people from the wildlife departments, from the Alpagist. Like, people came together, and that was really nice. And we sat around and had a conversation, and essentially transpired that we had two options: we change the route, or we cancel the event, or we never come back.
I mean, like around that time of the night, just before then, though, like how do you even deal with that in your head? Because you've done so much work up to that point, and now you're having these conversations. It must be like, we've been talking about racing. It must be like, when something goes wrong before a race and you're racing, it feels bad, right? But that's this times 1,000.
Oh man, there's so many layers to it, and I don't want the way that I've just described that to feel like it's like at the time it felt kind of unfair. Feels like too emotional of a word, but it felt felt a bit unfair. It felt a bit unreasonable, a bit like a crazy ask. Like, you can't be serious. But with hindsight, after speaking to them and now knowing everything that we do and the way they communicated us to us with the changes and the way that we made it right, no one was really in the wrong. There was an unforeseeable incident that occurred, which again can't go into like a huge amount of detail, but essentially due to some environmental concerns and some potential wildlife impact and things like that. It was the correct decision that we couldn't go that way. It was just the timing of it tied everyone's hands, and in the moment felt like this is ridiculous. But in hindsight, now with all the information, I can understand all of the decisions that were made by all the people, and I can I can accept all of it. Like, it does make sense. No one was in the wrong, but it just put us in a really difficult position because for me, there's so many layers. First of all, it's going to be incredibly difficult to deliver this event safely. And I don't mean by that like we're doing anything cowboy or sketchy, but just even doing everything by the book. Anything can happen. You're in the mountains, it's 30 degrees. You've got 250 runners in the 100K going through the night for the first time ever for a first edition event with a team who are out in this place for the first time ever. So I was very confident we could do it, but we were right there. It wasn't super comfortable. We weren't cruising through. This was a very big challenge. And then add on to that the timing. So the runners are already in bed, ready to come to the race, and the staff are already in bed, ready to come and deliver the race. So, how do you deal with that? Then the communication to the municipalities and the stakeholders and the press release type stuff that we need to do. How do we communicate that professionally and have it come across with no finger pointing, because no one's in the wrong, but also not have it come across as us being incompetent or making mistakes. So we really didn't want anything to come across in that way because it really was not within our control. But then also, I'm thinking about the brand as well, and the way the brand's perceived. And this is the first time that the French audience are dealing with RunThrough Trails, and we do not want to be that British company. We want to be Ultra Trail Morzine-Avoriaz. We are a French company. We employ French staff. We're trying to do this the right way and make it sustainable long term. We want this event to be huge, and it will be. But how do we manage that? And then I'm also thinking about the impact on everything. All my life and my family, and we're moving out here, and if we cancel this event, that's such a huge black mark in so many ways, and not just financially, but perception. People don't know the full story, so all they see is this company came and they tried to put an event and they were a joke and they cancelled. And that might not be fair, but a lot of people would have seen it that way, and I might have, as a jaded customer. So there was a lot to it. None of that was going to skew me and make me do anything unsafe or risky, which is why we had all the conversations with everybody. But yeah, like you say, it was it's problem solving mode. You stay calm and you look at it practically and you decide, well, what options do we have? Well, we can cancel. And if it's unsafe, we'll do so, but we don't want to do that. So what's left? Well, we change the route. Okay, well, how can we do that? And it just became me and Ed in a room for 9 hours, replanning the biggest event of our lives, undoing 9 months of planning and changing it and redoing it.
When you were doing that, like in that period though, when you and Ed are sitting in that room, like undoing, redoing, undoing, redoing, I'm sure it was like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. There must have been a couple of times where you're like we just can't do this. Was there a time like that, or was it like, no, this is going to happen?
No, there was about 10 minutes of that where we felt a bit sorry for ourselves, and then Ed's just excellent to work with, and we just started working. Like,
how did that work?
If this has to happen, what do we do next? One step at a time.
What did you do?
first things first, what route are we going to use? So we had to try and we can't remark 50k of trail. That's physically impossible. It's not possible. The route's marked. We can't go and remark stuff. So what are we going to do? We had the 25k route, and about 12k of the 25k route was unique to the 25k. All right, well, that's marked. Let's utilize that. We also want to keep we need to make it happen. We need to do it safely. I don't want to deliver a subpar product. No matter these changes, it doesn't matter. The course still has to be spectacular. So we wanted to use part of the 25k course, use the aid stations. We've not even really talked about aid stations, but we've got thousands of liters of water already dropped and prepped in place in these locations. Tom's calculated it all 2 liters per runner per aid station, this amount of food, this amount of gels. Well, now the flow of runners has changed completely. But how do we manage those changes? Like, where are the vehicles? Where's the product? Where's the water? So first things first was plot the routes. Does it work? Yes, it does. We landed on 47 kilometers and 95 kilometers, and I felt like that was acceptable. And the elevation and splits between aid stations that we worked out were not dissimilar, so you could use your same pacing and fueling strategy. So that was my first thing, was to dial that in. And once I was comfortable with that, then the medical team came in, we looked at it, and we redistributed them. They had 18 medical positions around the course. These guys were at another level. They'd been out on the mountains for 5 days setting up radio relay masts. We had a team of like 40 people with 18 medical positions on course. These guys deliver UTMB and these style of events. So they were incredible. And they said, yeah, we're happy. It's safe. We can redistribute. So, all these guys are back out of bed with smiles on their faces, like kind of keen for the challenge. Now it's midnight, it's 1 a.m. and we're sat around this. I mean, it's kind of cool. We're sat in front of this 90-inch touchscreen thing with GPX traps and routes. And in a way, I was kind of loving it, because who gets to do that?
Yeah.
Like, this is not a normal experience. And then we just went down from there. It was rebuild the timeline. Where does the product need to be? Who do we need to tell? How do we tell the runners? Blah, blah, blah. And me and Ed just split it up between us. And every single, can't understand the level of granular detail. Every single volunteer shift changed. Every single aid station product list changed. Every single level of the timeline of what our core team were going to do, where they were going to be, and what they were doing in those times changed. Where the leaders and where the masses were going to be at different times changed. Where the medics were going to be positioned changed. So anyway, whatever. We made the route changes and stuff. We made all the plans, and really all we had to do was move some product around, change some staff timings, and I had to go out and unmark and remark about 8 kilometers of course, and we could sew it all together and make it work. And so that's kind of, we moved forward with that.
Did it surprise you how people came together the way they did?
Like, yes and no, but that's why those people are there, man. It's the thing I started off by saying, is like when Katie and Tom and Kirsten and Katie and Jamie and even Lewis, he's not working the event, but like he gets dragged in. Simone, Liam, Graham, I don't want to miss anyone, but I think that's everybody, but obviously everyone that was there. When they wake up at 3:30, ready to do the hardest day's work they've ever done, and they wake up to a WhatsApp message, which is calmly explaining that everything they thought they were doing has changed, I just know they're going to do it. Like, they're going to panic for 5 seconds. They're going to take a breath, and then they're going to switch on and go. And that's what they did. And there was not a second's gap in that plan. Okay. There was not a second. These guys had 17 hours of minute by minute tasks where there was no room for error, no leeway, no gaps. And again, we wouldn't do it if we didn't think they could do it, but I knew they could do it, and they did it. So yeah, hats off. Like, it would not be possible without these guys.
It makes the bridge in Gloucester look pretty chill, doesn't
it? We did an event in Doha a couple of years ago, Doha Marathon, which was a huge thing for the company, and Matt and Ben took some staff out. Graham was one of those staff members, and he's always come back with these stories about how challenging that event was in so many ways. I'm not going to get into those, but some very experienced, very qualified staff members may have kind of had moments of breaking down in tears and really struggling with the pressure and the challenge of the event. But they all came away from it afterwards saying that was the coolest experience ever, and I would go straight back. But my God, that was hard. At one point, when things had slowed down a little bit on Sunday morning, I grabbed Graham at one point. I was like, how does this compare to Doha? Because I wasn't there. And I won't use his exact words, but
I
he
can
said,
imagine.
"Yeah, Doha was a effing piece of pee compared to this, mate."
Yeah.
So yeah, it was the hardest thing any of us had ever done from a work perspective, and everyone said the same thing. But they also said it was the most rewarding, best thing they'd ever done in their working lives, and maybe even to some degree, like in their lives. And the level of camaraderie, and you know, you don't forget that.
Yeah. And it's kind of the essence of what we've talked about through this whole conversation, where you don't get that thing unless you do the thing. Like this is sitting on top of the mountain, isn't it? Looking at the view because you've decided to put on your trail shoes one day, but expanded to a whole new level. But it's in essence what it is,
Yeah,
because if you weren't in this position doing the thing that you do and the things that you have done to get to this position, you would never have been in front of that big touch screen remapping that GPX, or
no,
even thought that you could do it. And I think that's the thing to think about this. It's like, it's not that you changed it and we delivered it. It's you had the ability to do that, because without everything you've done up to that point, that wouldn't have happened.
yeah. There's no way with a core team of 8 staff and the amount of stuff that had to be done with that time frame in that situation with that specific set of conditions, not forgetting the 30 degrees, because that was a constant source of concern, because that is a very serious, like, to go and run that type of race in 30 degrees, those runners are going to have a very
Yeah.
difficult day, and we have to make that as safe as possible. So in addition to the regular aid stations, there's extra water stations, there's cooling stations, there's hoses, but there's no taps. So what do we do? We've bought pumps that go in rivers in certain locations with drill batteries to hose people down, which is an essential part of the plan. But now the course has changed, so we couldn't miss one thing. If that hose isn't in the location it needs to be in, and those medics can't do what they need to do, and someone has an issue there, which very much could happen, then it all just falls apart. It doesn't matter how good all this other stuff you've done is. Like, yeah, it's so hard to explain the level of responsibility, um, and I I can confidently say that I don't think there are many companies or teams that could do what we did over those 2 days with that few people, with those many changes in those conditions. I really, really don't think so. And it's hard because these are my mates, these are people that I've recruited or people that I've worked with for years. It's great. And it's people who I'm like family, like
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good friends. So it sounds kind of pumped up and fake, but I don't know, man. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that should have been possible. Like, genuinely, it was unbelievably impressive.
I feel like we could probably do about 4 hours on this, mate. But
Yeah, I know,
I
right?
am aware that we've been speaking for like an hour and 20 already, and there are still a couple of things that I definitely want to cover, because
Yeah.
with all of that that has happened, and the repurposing, the replanning, the minutiae of kind of every minute, every position, every staff member, just every facet of this plan changing. That's just the one element of this. The second element is actually delivering the event, with all the changes that have been made, and then seeing if the event has the impact that you hope the event has. But all of this makes that even bigger, even more emotional, I would imagine, from your point of view, even, just a bigger thing. Like, what was it like on that day, seeing the event happen? Was there a moment where you thought this is working, or were you kind of on edge for the whole time?
you it's like a level of kind of it's a it's that thing of there's no space, so it's literally just like, this is done, what's next, this is done, what's next, so there's no room to even think, and the second you get a chance to think, you're almost sort of shut down. Like, this is where the emotional side comes into it for everybody. And if you stop and think about what you're trying to do, it's overwhelming. And when issues arise where you've got 3, 4 issues and you're trying to kind of triage and decide what's most important, and you have to accept that some issues that normally would be unacceptable issues to ignore, like running out of coke on an aid station or whatever it might be, that might sound a bit ridiculous to say that's unacceptable, but for us that's unacceptable. But that's gone. Like, that's going to happen. That will happen because there's 10 other things that are absolutely essential that need to be seen to first. So that was one of the most challenging things, I think, for everybody, was accepting that we would have to compromise on some things to make sure that we could do everything else safely. Those compromises were relatively small, but they existed, and to ignore them would be to lie about it. So we did have to compromise on some things. So that was really challenging. But yeah, for me, it was do the changes. Then the runners are arriving. Then me and Ed stood on the stage, and again, like, the trail running community is so amazing. People don't enter 100K in the mountains and not have an understanding of how difficult that is to put on. So we just stood on the stage and said, look, we feel how you're going to feel after the race. Like, we've not slept, we're incredibly exhausted, we're very stressed, we've done the absolute best we can, and we've got some good news and some bad news. And the good news is the course is incredible and it's all going to happen, and we will keep you safe and you will have an incredible experience. The bad news is this crude aid station no longer exists. There's a QR code on the big screen. You've now got to download the new track. Some of the aid stations might have moved around. The provisions on the aid stations might not be up to the standard we want them to be, but you will have as good of an experience as you could have expected. And we've done everything we possibly can. And the people were really accepting and understanding, which was incredible. And then for me, my job really became, I had to go and do the changes on the course, because I could not ask anyone else to do it because they hadn't had the time to understand what the changes were. So I had to drive up to Avoriaz and run out like a madman and unflag and reflag some sections. And I wanted to see that it was linked up and that it worked. And then once that was in place, I knew it worked. And then for me, I wanted to manage the staff and lead the event and coordinate the communications and the movements, race control, race director role, which is my job. And I wanted to manage the people because I care about these people, and I didn't want them to like feel the pressure that I was feeling, because I wasn't sure that they would be able to sustain it. Like, I didn't want it to be a horrendous experience, and I didn't want to ask more of anyone than I thought was reasonable. But I had to, 5 times over through the day. So yeah, my main thing was like, make sure the runners are going to be safe, and then make sure the staff are okay. Like, even though I kind of knew they wouldn't be. Yeah, it was hard, man. It was really
When
hard.
you like, we're obviously talking about it now, we're reflecting on it, but like I mentioned this before, like I saw you on screen like probably 2 days after, I think, and you look knackered, just to put it politely. But like, it's not just the actual physical tiredness that you would have been experiencing. It's a hell of a lot of, I'm going to use the word turmoil, because it is, right? It's emotional turmoil. It's something you've built up to, as you said, for 9 months. You and Ed have been planning this thing. Then it gets ripped up. And in however long it was, a night, you have to replan and redeliver the whole thing. Like, that doesn't, you just can't get through that and not feel some sort of emotional stress. Like, how long do you think you're through that now? Like, or how long do you think that process is going to take, or will take, or has taken?
Yeah, no, it's fine now. The physical stuff was nothing, man. Like,
Yeah,
honestly,
yeah.
it was fine. It was so unimportant that your body just decides to ignore it. Like,
Okay.
it didn't matter. Tom's got a bit of an injury. Katie's ankle's a bit sore. I broke my ankle and smacked my foot in interlocking on the second day, but didn't really want to make too much of a fuss out of it because there was no other choice. So like, I couldn't really walk one day, and then it was just painkillers and ice. And actually, now it's completely fine. Luckily, I think I just bruised it, but yeah, that would have been main concern, and that became least concern. And it was way, way, way more emotional kind of stress, purely because you care so much and you want it to be so good, that you just care so much. And so you just have to try so hard. And then when it isn't quite how you want it to be, that's just a really horrible, horrible thing to have to accept. But it was how we wanted it to be, because it was an unbelievable event. And so that was the craziest thing. And then, yeah, just the mental kind of, the mental load was to another level, because the amount of moving parts and everything, it doesn't end with like, oh, well, here's the timeline and now it's good to go. It's constant problem solving on no sleep. So I think that's what made it hard. It was the no sleep, the emotional stress of like really, really just wanting it to be good and being scared that it wouldn't be, the practical pressures of just trying to keep everyone safe, staff and runners, and deliver a safe, good event. But then also just the constant mental plate spinning, which I love, and that's why I do the job. And I like that challenge, but this was like to the limits of what was manageable. So yeah, your brain's just working a million miles per hour, and so to come down off that is like almost impossible. And like I said, we'd been out 5 a.m. on the Friday morning, marking the course with Lewis. We'd marked 20K, of course. So that had been 5 a.m. Then it's 5 a.m. Saturday morning and the runners are arriving. You've been through that whole night. So there's 24 hours of like intensity. And then from 5 a.m. Saturday to 5 a.m. Sunday, I'm delivering the event. And I didn't go to bed until 5 a.m. Sunday. So I had 48 hours. Oh, yeah. Hyper intensity. And there were moments of, I'm loving this. And then there were moments of, I'm not sure I can do this. And then there were moments of, we're just in work mode. And like, in hindsight, I loved it. In the moment, it was very difficult. Yeah, no, I mean, I loved it. I'm so proud of what we did and what the guys did. And I reckon it took a week to answer your question. I was going out for runs after I got back to the UK and my entire body felt heavy, but my mileage the week before had been relatively low. And I was completely mentally fatigued. Like I was gone. I was shattered.
I like this though, like just talking about it and like going over it all with you. And this is the sort of thing that, because I know the goals for Trails and I know like what you want it to be in the future, and what Matt and Ben also foresee it being in the future, the founders at RunThrough, for people that listen to this and don't know, like, but this is always something that I feel like we can come back to. It's like Avengers, right? They all have this story.
It's an origin story.
Yeah, they have their origin story, and that's.
Yeah.
But I know it's like I kind of say it tongue in cheek, but it does almost feel like that. It's the first year this has happened. No one could have foreseen it. As you say, you're sitting in that room and you're thinking, if this gets cancelled, like, to put it bluntly, we're fucked. Like, we don't know what we're going to do, because like my whole life is coming out here. My family's coming out here. This is the flagship event. This is like what the whole project has almost been built on. Like, this is going to be the thing that for 5 years is going to be huge. And then let's see where we go after that, right? But that is what you're hanging your whole hat on. And this happens. So then it makes the whole thing even more pressurized. When you did start seeing people coming across the line after experiencing what they did experience, because again, go and see some of the footage. It looked unbelievable. I know the feedback was brilliant as well. Like, what did that feel like for you, who just had to go through all of the stuff that you just had to go through? Yeah. Yeah, man.
Indescribable. Mental. Yeah.
I mate, like, and that's the thing, and that's, you know, to see you feeling emotional about it, it's like, that's what it means, right? That's what it means. Like, this is your dream. This is what you've put all of this work into, not just for 9 months with Morzine, but like, you go back to when you were in Canada and that story that, as they say, go and catch up on that. And then you come back to the UK and you end up working for RunThrough, and then the Trails thing happens, and then the Europe thing happens. And then it comes to this like head, and you're like, oh my God, like, I need to make this whole thing work.
Totally. I mean, there's a huge part of it too. Well, a huge part we've not even talked about, which is like the Matt and Ben's part that they played in it, because they would downplay it and say, "Oh, we've played a part in this. We've given you the opportunity to do it, and then you've gone away and done this great job, and the team's amazing," and they would palm it off like that. But the level of kind of trust and
support as well,
the ability to just say, massive amount of support. It wouldn't happen without those guys taking a bit of a leap of faith and backing me and the team to do it. And they were both there. Everyone's at Morzine. We kept saying that for the whole year. Everyone's going to be at Morzine. Everyone's there. Staff are there. People have flown out. Sophie's flown out with her family to run. Graham's entire family's flying out for the retreat. We've got Lewis and Gemma there. We've got so many people who recognise us, know us, UK audience. I talked about people coming from outside the country earlier as a big pitch to the town. We ended up looking at the statistics post-race, and I was actually blown away by it. We had 40% of people come from outside France, and we had 90% of people come from outside the Haute-Savoie region, which, to be honest, you don't see that when you analyse entry statistics from like UTMB style races. Most people come from the country and from the area, which that was a huge goal achieved. And for the town and stuff, that was a massive tick for them. But for us, that meant it just added even more weight to it. This was the launch of the brand, and to be able to do it so well, genuinely happy with how it went. The courses were unbelievable. The event village was the most premium, clean event village I've ever been a part of. The presentations, we had a crowd around the stage. We had local partners getting involved. The content was unbelievable. And through these moments, Jamie was really good because he could see us struggling and he'd come over and he'd be like, look, guys, I know you're in the middle of it, but just like, watch this for 5 seconds. This is what you're doing. And you get a couple of drone shots and you just kind of like, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah, when the feedback started coming in from the runners about how much they were enjoying it and how great things were, and you get negative feedback too, you always do, and you always will. And there's loads of stuff we can improve. I'm not going to pretend for a second it was perfect. And to name a couple of things just quickly, like the food on the aid stations needs to be another level for this European market and for what the French market expects, with solid foods and different drinks. And anyway, for the 100K races specifically, we're going to improve that massively. We're already working on it. That was a big piece for sure. But yeah, it was hard to describe, man, when it started to flow, but it still didn't feel like you could relax. You couldn't relax. It didn't feel relaxed until I woke up so I got back to the chalet at 5 a.m. on the Sunday morning. I got 2.5 hours sleep and I woke up and I was so scared to open my phone. I woke up from a nightmare that I'd missed a shift change on an aid station at Morzine-Avoriaz. And no one will get that other than the guys who work the event. And I hope they're listening because that will mean something to somebody. We could do a 3-hour podcast on stories from this event. But anyway, and I rang Ed and I was like, how's it going? Because we had to both be at the event. One of us had to be at the event at all times. So I couldn't sleep while Ed was there and he couldn't sleep while I was there. And we both had to be there because so much was going on. So he covered me for those 2.5 hours. And I called him and I was just waiting for another problem that we'd have to solve. And I was like ready for it. And he just said, oh, mate, things are so smooth. And his voice was calm. And Sunday felt like an absolute dream, mate. Sunday was so smooth. Again, because Saturday was so hard. Yeah. So that was it. Sunday was the enjoyment. And it was seeing everybody. It was seeing Ben at the finish of the race when he battled through and finished the 50K, even though he almost died a death at Morzine-Avoriaz, and he's cramping up after racing Interlaken, and seeing Matt on Saturday after running the 25K, and Lucy came with Phoebe, and seeing just everybody that I knew and all these people I've been interacting with on social media and people that had taken part in the race, speaking to Bastien, who won the 100K. It was a ridiculous time. Been speaking to him and his team manager. The list is endless, and yeah, I got to revel in it a little bit through the day on Sunday, but the job was nowhere near done until Monday. But then the job wasn't done until Thursday because the pack down was enormous, and we'd learned that as well. Normally the event finishes and you go home and you chill the next day and you revel in it, but not the case with these. It's 3-4 days post race of clean up, tidy up, post race conversations, like clearing course. The amount of litter, there's just so much to it. It's insane. Just taking 8 hire cars back to Tonon down the road, it's like a nothing thing, but there's 3 hours of 6 people's day. Yeah, I mean it's almost hard to talk about some of it because it was just such it was a whirlwind, and I really don't want it to come across like at any point we were out of control and anything that was done was dangerous or unprofessional, or we weren't able, or we bit off more than we could chew. It's nothing like that. It's just you don't see this because you don't hear from people who do these things often, I would imagine. And so this is the reality. And anyone who's delivered an event of this level, I'm sure would feel the same way that I do, would kind of talk about it in the same way. And I hope that this goes some way to kind of like legitimizing what we do, and then like one shows that the passion and the genuine kind of care that goes into it, and 2 shows how hard it is to do this. Like this is not an easy thing to do. So yeah, if you see staff on these events, if you see volunteers, if you see something that could be improved, like come at it, tell us, like be constructive, because we always want it to be better. We're never trying to cut corners, we're never trying to cut costs, we're never trying to fuck anyone over. Even though it might seem like that to you as a runner on the day when there's no Coke on that aid station, or there should be a bit more, an extra water stop, or maybe whatever it might be, you didn't get as many pictures as you would have liked to get. We want to deliver it so that every runner finishes feeling like that was the best experience I've ever had, but that might be an impossible goal. And so if you've got criticism and feedback for us, please give it, because we are always trying our absolute hardest. And I hope that comes across.
You just said about for anybody listening to this that has delivered something like this, I don't think there's anybody listening to this that has delivered something like this. It's like, and I'm going to go back to that mountaintop analogy that we spoke about before, where it's like getting up to the top of that summit, like looking at something that not many people have ever seen before. I think that's what we said. Like, that's something that like I've had, you've had, anybody that listens to this that has gone to remote places has had. The fact that they're in a place where people haven't, or not many people have seen that thing before. I would say nobody has seen what you saw before. Like that's never happened before, because it's such an individualistic thing to have happened. Like, nobody will have had to deal with those problems. So that's why it's such a big thing. And that's why it feels like such a big thing, because it was such a big thing
Yeah.
and
It was a
nobody's
big
ever had
thing.
to do it. This is insane. Like,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
somebody said to me, and we'll probably come to a close, like with a couple more here, but like somebody said to me, like, we're going out to rival UTMB, right? Do you think, and this was before Morzine, and you hear those words and you're like, that's a big thing to say, right? UTMB's a monster. They're the premium company in the space, and they've been around for years, and they've built and built and built, but they have to start somewhere. There's delivering an event like we delivered in Morzine. I say we, you, and the team delivered in Morzine. Does that give you solace and hope that that could be a thing?
100%. Like, it's something that we'd said, and we knew that we're as good as it gets, like world class. But it's so hard when you say stuff about yourself. It's different when you're racing, because if you run a certain time, you kind of know whether or not you're there. Like, you either are or you're not. Whereas when it comes to like a job, it's difficult, because we've got such a cool, fun culture at Run Through, and everyone's pretty kind of young and passionate, and work feels like fun. So to stand there and kind of say, like, Matt's really good at this stuff, because Matt's good at stepping back and seeing it for what it is. And he's like, we're a global leader in running events. We're industry leading experts in delivering events. And you hear it and you kind of know it's true, but it's hard for like the staff, I think, to digest that and to feel it for sure, like to really believe it, because they're just going and doing their job every day, and it's kind of fun. They're hanging out with the mates, but they don't really see the impact of what they're doing on a bigger scale. And that's where events like Morzine, or things like the Summer Social, which we've got coming up this week, it's our opportunity as a leadership team to step back and try and show them, like, this is what you guys do and this is the impact it has. And for me, I'm a runner at heart, and I would travel around the world doing UTMB World Series races for the rest of my life. Like, they're incredible. The company is amazing. I love it. Everything they do is unbelievable. I've never experienced an event like UTMB World Finals in Chamonix. Whether we can ever rival that particular week, I honestly don't know. I would love to say we can, and I think it's definitely feasible. But that is a different level of thing that they've done there, and it's incredible. But at the same time, we're coming into this with the mindset that we can be as good, if not better, than a lot of what those guys do. And I think there's a huge gap in the market to do so. And I've been to a lot of events, UTMB World Series events, and other organisers that are great, but could be better, and that I know we could do better. And I think Morzine year one, especially because we're creating this event from scratch. We're not acquiring existing events and branding them. We're creating them. This did not exist. We drew a line on a map 12 months ago. I had a meeting in the office with Bruno and Bruno 12 months ago. We had a coffee and agreed that we'd do the event. It didn't exist before that. We made this from nothing. So to see that come together with those sort of numbers year one, can I see this being 4,000 people in year three? Can I see us adding a 100-mile event that goes through Switzerland around the Porte de Soleil, and having 10,000 people over a week-long event in 10 years' time? 100%. There's no question. I think that's what it will be. And I think it will be an event that will rival those events. And I think it will be our flagship event moving forward. And I think the fact that it was what it was this year only makes that cooler, and only makes it more special. And I hope, like, we can stand up and kind of tell that story in 10 years' time, when the event is what I've just described, and people can kind of see the reality of what it takes to create something like this. And it doesn't happen in a year, it happens over many years with lots of people involved. And it also can't happen without the buy-in and investment from the local community and the volunteers and the town and the police and all these stakeholders. And I had to go back to Morzine last week for the day for a meeting. And I sat in the town hall, kind of bodged through a little bit of French to introduce myself, and then sat there quietly while Ed did all the translating for me. And we had all these people sat around, and we had the volunteer lead and the people from the tourist office and the mairie and the police and all the stakeholders involved. And they sat around and they told us what we did well, and what we could improve on. And they said they were impressed with how we delivered it and the professionalism, and they were very impressed with how we'd reacted to these changes. And they look forward to working with us for years to come. And they want to help us more, and they want to bring more volunteers and get more partners and do more to make the event big, because they were blown away with how incredible it was. And the runners is one part, but that stakeholder buy-in for me behind the scenes is arguably more important, because the event cannot happen without those guys involved, and they are what are going to amplify it. So, long answer to a short question. Yes, I do think we can do that, and I think we showed that we can a couple of weeks back.
Mate, I think let's wrap it up here, because look, I could get on to the whole move of you and the family over to Europe, but I think that's probably a good place to say, like, go and subscribe to the RunThrough Trails podcast. If you don't listen and you're listening on the Gone Running feed, go and subscribe to James's pod. If you like high level trail runners, there's an amazing amount of guests coming up on that podcast. Lewis Moses is also James's co-host. They have catch-up episodes as well. And if you're listening over on the RunThrough Trails feed, come over and listen to Gone Running. If you've enjoyed this conversation, if my patter hasn't been too stressful, then yeah, come over and listen to Gone Running as well. But yeah, mate, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for being so candid. And I'm coming to Morzine next year.
Mate, everyone's coming. You've got to go. Yeah. But yeah, Ben, thanks so much, mate. This was really cool. And it was so much nicer to do it in this format without me having to come up with questions and try and tell the story. And I know it's gone on long, but this has been my favourite podcast we've done so far. And yeah, huge thank you to everyone involved with the event, with everything we do, to the entire team at RunThrough, to everyone that ran. And just come back, just get involved and run inspired, as we say. So come and join us and be part of the journey.